Okay, now I'll hand over to Mohammed from Latitude Law, and we'll make a start.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed. I'm a partner at Latitude Law. I'll be joined today by my colleague, Nancy, who's a senior caseworker. So we'll be going through the immigration options following graduation as part of our seminar. Sorry, here we go. I'll just be starting off by explaining the most common routes for students following graduation. After this slide, I will pass you over to my colleague Nancy, who will explain the graduate visa route, and I'll be taking over again in regards to explaining the skilled worker visa requirements. So the most common routes for students when it comes to following your student visas and following graduation, if you've completed your course, or you've successfully completed your course, there's an option to go to the graduate visa route, also known as a post-study work visa route, which at the moment is 2 years, and we'll explain that in more detail shortly. And also, if you've completed your course, another possibility is switching over to a skilled worker visa if you're being offered sponsorship from an approved UK VI sponsor license holder. Now, there are options for you to switch into other visa categories if you don't complete your course. That could be, for example, you could still switch to a skilled worker visa if your course or certificate of sponsorship has a start date later than your course completion date. So that's a possibility of how you can still switch to a skilled worker visa. Also, there's a possibility of switching to a global talent visa. There's many options, for example, digital technology, research. It's a non-sponsored visa, and it's a great visa because you could even get a settlement after 3 years, depending on the route that you go on the global talent. Or you may even find yourselves, for example, a British partner who is British or settled in the UK, and therefore you could switch into a family partner visa route as well. So they're the possible options for you to switch into if any of these are applicable following your graduation. Now I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Nancy, who will explain the graduate visa route for you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, and happy to meet you, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So I will be taking you through the graduate visa route, and this route I'm sure you're all familiar with. This is for students who have successfully completed at least a degree course in the UK to then apply to stay in the UK for another 2 or 3 years. So at the moment, for bachelor's or master's degree students, you can apply to stay for 2 years. If you've completed a PhD, then you can stay for 3 years. So there is a recent change to the immigration rules that says if you've successfully completed your course after 1st of January 2027, then the 2 years would be reduced to only 18 months. I mean, it's not like a massive reduction, but just bear in mind, if you can only successfully complete your course after 1st of January 2027, then that new rules might affect you. That means you can only apply to stay in the UK for 18 months. However, if you have achieved a PhD, that 3 years remain the same, so you can still stay for another 3 years. One thing to note, graduate visa cannot be extended. You cannot extend this visa. There's just one time in your whole life to apply for this visa. This route also doesn't lead to settlement, so you can't achieve settlement by going on the graduate visa route. However, the 2 or 3 years you spent on the graduate visa route would count towards the 10 years long residence if you want to achieve settlement eventually in the UK after 10 years. And like most applications you make in the UK, you have to meet the validity, suitability and eligibility requirements, and we will discuss them one by one. Okay, talking about validity requirements, so these parts are very important because to make a valid application, you have to meet all these requirements. And it's important for students applying in the UK because if you don't make a valid application, if your application is rejected because it's invalid, then it would affect your immigration status. So what we call, there is a 3C leave in the UK, which means if you make a valid application before your current visa expires, you can lawfully stay in the UK until a decision is made on your new application. So for example, if your student visa is going to expire, but you make a valid graduate visa application before your student visa expires, you can continue living in the UK. There's no restriction until the application is decided. But however, if you don't meet one of these validity requirements, your application might be invalid. That means you wouldn't benefit from free leave, so you would risk being an overstayer. Now, the validity requirements are, for example, you have to apply on the correct application form. It's very easy to find. You just Google graduate visa and you will come up with a government page where you can find a link to apply. You have to pay the correct application fee. This is currently £880. You also need to pay the IHS fee, like your student visa, you pay this fee. So it's currently £1,035 per year. And if you're applying for 2 years, that's £2,070 you have to pay. If you're applying for 3 years, that's £3,105 you have to pay. If you have dependents who are under the age of 18, then they have to pay a discounted fee, which is £776 per year. You have to submit your biometrics. So I believe all of you would have an e-visa now. So you just need to apply via the IDV check app, the UKVI app. You don't need to book a biometric appointment at a TLS centre. But if there's any reason, for example, you can't verify your identity through the app, then you can always book yourself an appointment at a TLS centre. But when you make this application, you must physically be in the UK. So if you're travelling overseas and your student visa is going to expire and you can't come back to the UK, then that's going to be an issue because you can't make a graduate visa application when you're outside the UK. And you must hold, or you must have last held leave as a student. There are specific documents you need to submit with your application. We will come to that at a later stage, but they're quite straightforward and you just need photocopies of all the documents. You don't really need originals. You just need to upload them onto the UKVI portal. A decision is usually made within 3 to 8 weeks of your biometric appointment if you booked one. If you submit it via the UKVI app, then you don't need to attend biometric appointment and the processing time just starts the moment you pay the application fee. And there is no priority service for this type of application. And just be mindful that you can't travel outside the UK when the application is being processed. So if you do have travel plan, then you might need to cancel it until a decision is made. Okay, when it comes to suitability requirements, these are usually related to your character. So if you don't have any issue with your immigration history, if you don't have criminal convictions, hopefully you don't, then you should meet these requirements. There shouldn't be any issue. And also you can't have debt to NHS for more than £500. But because you've paid IHS fee as part of your student visa, so you shouldn't be worried about that. Now, the eligibility requirements are the most important requirements for this application. So you have to basically score 70 points for your application, and these are divided into 3 sections. So firstly, you have to successfully completed the course of study. Second point is that your course of study must meet the qualification requirement. And third of all, you must have studied in the UK for at least 12 months. And we will discuss them one by one. Okay, the first requirement is successful course completion requirement. So you have to have studied with a higher education, a qualified higher education provider. If you study with the University of Manchester, you automatically meet this requirement. You must have successfully completed the course of study during the last grant of permission. So what that means, I'll give you an example. If you've studied a bachelor's degree in the UK, you've successfully completed your course, and then you applied for another student visa leave to go on the master's course. But for example, for any reason you failed your master's course, you didn't get your master's degree, you might ask, can I apply for graduate visa because I've successfully completed a bachelor's degree in the UK? The answer is no, because you failed to complete the most recent grant of leave within your student visa. The course that you granted most recent student visa was the master's course, and because you didn't finish that, you couldn't apply for graduate visa, if that makes sense. If permitted to change course of study without fresh application, then you have to complete the course to which you have changed to. And how the Home Office would know whether you've successfully completed your course is that the university would upload all the students' information onto the UKVI portal. So the Home Office would have all the students' information who have successfully completed their course. So that's how the university notify the Home Office about who's completed the course.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, coming on to the qualification requirement, like we said before, you have to at least complete a bachelor's degree in the UK. It can be bachelor's degree, master's degree. There are also other relevant qualifications that is acceptable, for example, law conversion course or legal practice course, but I think most applicable to you would be either a bachelor's course or master's course. You must have, like we mentioned before, you must have secured qualification during your last grant of student permission. There is one exception. If you've been granted permission as a student union sabbatical officer, then that's permitted. You don't have to complete any course if you're undertaking the role of a student union sabbatical officer, but you have to complete your course of study before you undertake that role. Okay. Study in the UK requirement is really straightforward. If your course is 12 months or less, then you must have studied in the UK for the full duration of your course. If your course is longer than 12 months, then you have to physically be in the UK studying for at least 12 months. And most of you should meet this requirement because COVID was there was COVID concessions in place, but because COVID was 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think that would affect you. Conditions of status as a graduate. So you have to, like I said before, you will be granted leave at the moment for 2 years if you're a bachelor's degree achiever or master's degree achiever, 3 years if you're a PhD achiever. But starting from 1st of January 2027, you can only be granted 18 months after that date. You can take employment. There's no restriction on what you can do, what you can't do. You can be self-employed, you can start your own company, or you don't need to be employed at all. So it's really a lot of freedom attached to this visa. The only restriction is that you can't work as a professional sports person. So you can't be a professional footballer, for example, if you're on a graduate visa. And there is no access to public funds. So don't be claiming benefits when you're on a graduate visa. You can study, but you can only study at a course that's not suitable to be sponsored as a student. Okay, your family members. So if your family are already here, your partner or children already here as dependents on your student visa, they can apply as dependents on your graduate visa as well. But if you say your dependents are not here, they're overseas, they're not dependents on your student visa, then at this moment, when you apply for graduate visa, you wouldn't be able to bring them over. So they're only permitted if they're already dependents on you. With your partner, it's quite straightforward. You obviously have to show your relationship is subsisting at this moment in time. You have to submit, for example, your proof of address to show you've been living together in the UK. Your marriage certificate has to be submitted. If you do have dependent children under the age of 18, then birth certificate must be submitted. And if they are studying in the UK, then you can get a letter from the school to confirm their enrollment. So benefits of using a graduate visa, we all know that there is no restriction, not many restrictions on this type of visa. So it's very good for you to get work experience in the UK, and we can see a lot of employers in the UK, they prefer to employ you on a graduate visa to test it out for 2 years, 3 years time to see if you're suitable for the job. And if you are, a lot of them, especially big companies, they're willing to offer you sponsorship after this initial 2 years or 3 years period. And also they can pay you a discounted salary as you're a new entrant to the job market, which Mohammed will discuss later on. So it's a very good visa for you to try to find job opportunities in the UK if you do want to stay in the UK. and it's preferred by many employers in the UK. And you can also switch into other visa routes in the UK when you hold a graduate visa. For example, you can switch into skilled worker, or if you later on have a British partner, you can switch into the family route. So you don't have to leave the UK to apply again. So that's the benefits of the graduate visa. And documents you need to upload to the UK VI portal when you apply, they're very straightforward. So for example, your passport, your ID, your CAS that university issue to you when you apply for your student visa, evidence of you completing your degree, for example, degree certificate or a letter from the university confirming you've successfully completed your course. If you've had scholarship in the last 12 months, then you have to get a letter from the agency who's issued you scholarship to allow you to apply for the graduate visa. And if you do have family members, then like we said, we need to, show your family relationships, so marriage certificates, birth certificates, etc. So there are some commonly asked questions and answers, and we'll discuss them one by one. So can I submit my graduate application before I receive my final results? So like we mentioned before, the university will inform the Home Office by uploading all students' data onto the Home Office portal. So if you apply without receiving your final results, there might be a risk that the Home Office haven't received, your result or the confirmation from the university that you have completed your course. So they might just cause delay in processing your application. So that's the only issue with that. If you're confident that you have successfully completed your course, then you can apply, that's no issue, but there might just be slight delay if the Home Office haven't received confirmation from the university. So our advice would be just wait for your final results before applying. Can students submit before all course fees have been paid? The answer is no, because paying your course fee is considered as part of your course. So if you haven't paid all your course fee, you haven't completed your course and your application might be refused. What if the name of your course changed? If it's changed by the university, it wouldn't affect you, so you don't need to worry about that. The content remains the same, that's acceptable. Can I travel outside the UK after I have completed my course, but before I submit my application for a graduate visa? So you can. There is no restriction on you to travel outside the UK when your student visa is still valid. However, one thing that you need to remember is that if your course is finished way earlier than the course end date on your CAS, then the Home Office, the university might inform the Home Office, oh, this student has already completed their course, there's 6 months or 1 year left on their student visa, they don't need that time because they've completed their course. Then what the Home Office might do is that they might email you to say, oh, the university have informed us you've completed your course, so we are going to shorten your student visa because you don't need that much, 6 months, 1 year left on your visa anymore. And if you're overseas at the time, for any reason, you might not have received the email from the Home Office. You might not know at all that your visa has been shortened or has been cancelled. Then, as we said before, the graduate visa has to be made in the UK. So when you try to travel back to the UK, you might face issue at the border because your student visa at the time has been cancelled. So there is a slight risk of you travelling outside the UK after your course is finished. But if it's just for 2-3 weeks holiday, you should be fine. And if your student visa is going to expire 2-3 months after your course completion date, you should be safe as well because it's only a short period. Usually, if it's longer than 6 months left on your student visa, the risk might be higher. Okay, I'll pass on to Mohammed, who will explain the skilled worker visa for you.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for that explanation on the graduate visas. So for those who have just joined the seminar, my name is Mohammed, I'm a partner at Latitude Law. So I'll be explaining the skilled worker visa requirements. So as part of the skilled worker visa requirements, Again, there's similar to graduate visa requirements, there's validity requirements, suitability requirements, and also eligibility requirements. If you complete your course, you could switch into a skilled worker visa category, which I explained earlier. And the good thing about a skilled worker visa route, unlike a student or graduate visa route, is after 5 years in the UK as a skilled worker, it does lead to settlement. As I've explained already in regards to validity, suitability, and eligibility, and I'll explain to you one by one in regards to them. So in regards to the actual validity of being able to apply for this application, there's certain criteria. There's condition A, B, and C. One of the main ones is condition A. So in order to apply for a skilled worker...
Sorry, you keep going.
Sorry. In order to apply for a... I'll just move this. Yeah. The applicant must have been applying for permission to stay or had stayed as a student. And like I said, there's conditions A, B, and C. So for condition A, must have completed a course of study for which the confirmation of acceptance of studies was, or the CAS was assigned for. And condition B, must be studying a full-time course at a study at degree level or above with a higher educational provider, for example, University of Manchester, who has got a track record of compliance. And the certificate of sponsorship must not have had a start date no earlier than the course completion date. So again, essentially, the course date must have a date after the CAS completion date in order to satisfy that criteria. And the third one is mainly for PhD students. So again, it's got similar to condition B, that must be studying a full-time course of study which leads to an award of a PhD at a university that's got a track record of compliance. And also the second part is, unlike the condition B, where the course has to have a start date after the CAS completion date, for PhD students, it can be after 24 months of having completed the PhD. So you don't necessarily have to complete the full course. As long as you've done 24 months of it, then you should be able to switch over to a skilled worker visa category. Okay. In terms of the eligibility requirements, so there's 50 points in total in regards to what is known as mandatory points, and there's 20 points for what is known as tradable points, which is to do with salary, and that is, I'm sure, one of the main talking points at this moment in time when it comes to skilled worker visa requirements. So the first 50 points is, when it's broken down, the first 20 points from that 50 is in regards to having a certificate of sponsorship. So a certificate of sponsorship is something similar to your CAS. However, it will have your employment details, job title, salary, your personal details, etc. And when you get assigned a certificate of sponsorship, you have a unique reference which you use as part of your skilled worker visa application. Without that reference or without a cost, you can't meet the 20 points. The following 20 points is in regards to the job being at an appropriate level. Now, up until the recent changes on the 22nd of July, the job has to be what is known as an RQF level 6 role, which is degree level or degree level type job. Now, however, the government have introduced what is known as a temporary shortage list, and there's also an immigration salary list. Basically, in simple terms, these lists are roles where there's a shortage of these sort of professions, and therefore only if the job is within the temporary shortage list or the immigration salary list, then you could be offered jobs below RQF level 6, which could be RQF level 3 to 5. And in regards to the most recent changes, there was around 100 jobs that got removed from the skilled worker list, and some of them have been put now onto the temporary shortage or immigration salary list. There are some disadvantages to that. It is time limited. At the moment, jobs on that list can only be up until the 31st of December 26. The government could then take away them roles, and also dependents cannot be, or you cannot join you here in the UK if you've got a job under the RQF level 3 to 5. So that's in regards to job being on an applicable list. And also, we put a link there when the slides are shared with you. If you do click on appendix skill occupations or the temporary shortage list, you can see a list of whole jobs which are applicable for skilled worker sponsorship. The final 10 points from that 50 is in regards to English language requirement. If all of you successfully completed your course, you could use your degree certificates, BA level or above, masters, for example, to use as part of your English language qualification. And also at the moment, there's a B1 level in all 4 components: English language speaking, listening, reading and writing. That is going to increase from the 8th of January to B2 level. As you're all students, and if you're international students, you probably would have successfully completed a B2 level anyway, so you could use that as part of your English language criteria. So that's the 50 points. Just a quick run through: 20 points for certificate of sponsorship, 20 points for the role being on the skilled worker list, and 10 points for English language. The other 20 points, which has a substantial change over the last couple of years, is in regards to the minimum salary which is required for skilled worker visas. Now that's broken down into certain options. The starting point is option A. Anyone that wishes to go on a skilled worker visa has to be paid at least 41,700 or the going rate for the role. When I say going rate for the role, when you go onto the skilled worker list, to give you an example, let's just say I'm a solicitor. According to the government statistics, solicitors have to be paid, let's just say, 50,000 a year. So if I'm going to be sponsored as a solicitor, instead of being paid 41,700, I have to be paid 50,000. So it's either the 41,000 or the going rate. So you have to look at which is the going rate for the role. But 41,700 is the general rate, as they call it. If you've done a PhD and your job is in regards to your PhD qualification, you can be paid a lower rate than 41,700, and that's currently set at 37,500 or the 90% of the rate of the code that you're going to applying for, whichever is higher. In regards to option C, again, it's for those who are holding a PhD in a STEM subject, so science, technology, engineering, maths. They could be paid at even lower rate than 41,700. They could be paid 33,400 or 80% of the rate of the going rate. So again, if the rate is 50,000 for an engineering position, you could be paid 80% of that, or at least 33,400, whichever is higher from the two. If you could rely on, when I made reference to the immigration salary list, before that used to be known as a shortage occupation list. So there are certain healthcare jobs on there, construction jobs, where there's a need of these sort of workers here in the UK. So again, because of that, the government have put a reduced salary requirement for that, and that's currently at 33,400 as well, or whichever the going rate for the role, whichever is higher. However, there's no separate discount for that. So for example, I could be paid 90% of the code for PhD or 80% for STEM subjects. There's no percentage reduction. You could be paid 33,400 or the relevant rate for the role. The next one is quite important, especially for you students, what is known as a new entrant category. So the government are aware that they are in the market. For example, when you apply for a job, you're not going to be as experienced as someone who's been working for a company for quite a while. So you're not going to be paid the highest salary rate as what someone who's been there for quite experienced. So for that, at this moment in time, that is at 33,400. It used to be 20,960 only 2 years ago, increased to around 26,000 last year, and this year it's gone up to 33,400. Or again, you could be paid 70% of the role, whichever is higher. Now, who qualifies for new entrant? Now, anyone who's switching from a student visa or graduate visa could qualify as a new entrant, even if you've switched in the last 2 years. So you could finish your student visa this year, and next year you find yourself a sponsorship, you could still apply because it's within a 2-year window. Or if you're under the age of 26. So if you're under 26 or switching from student and graduate visa, or will do in the next 2 years, you could qualify under a new entrant salary rate of 33,400. Now, what's the benefits of recruiting a new entrant? So if you're an employer, you can pay a reduced salary. So instead of paying 41,700, you can be paying 33,400. However, there is a time limit of up to 4 years. From that 4 years, if you've done 2 years as a graduate, on a graduate visa route, then you can only be sponsored under new entrant for 2 years. But if you're switching straight from a student visa to a skilled worker, or you're under 26 and overseas, you could be offered that lower rate for up to 4 years. Then to make it that one final year, to take it up to the 5th year, you will have, the employer will have to bump up your salary to the general rate of at least 41,700. So, I mean, again, similar to what Nancy mentioned, one of the benefits of a graduate visa, similar to having in this circumstance, is in that 2-year period as a graduate, they could assess whether you're worth, giving a sponsorship for. You build your experience from there. They may not want to lose you. You can show your worth, and that would be a good way to to switch from a graduate visa. And it's becoming a common employment strategy for employers. If you're working in the healthcare industry, it is known as option K. Again, unlike 41,700, healthcare professionals can be paid at least 25,000. So for example, if you're working in dental, care worker, pharmacy, whatever healthcare industry could be, you could be paid 25,000 or again, the relevant rate for the role. So again, to give you a quick example, if you're working as an associate dentist, according to the NHS banding, your salary must be 40,000. So instead of being paid 25,000, you have to be paid the going rate for the role according to the relevant NHS banding scales or from the Office of National Statistics. In terms of financial requirement, as students, you would have known there would have been a financial requirement for you to have met before you got your student visa, similar to skilled workers. If you've been in the UK for more than 12 months, you automatically meet the financial requirements. You don't need to show any savings in your account. If you've been in the UK for less than 12 months, or you're applying for entry clearance, you have to show that you've held at least £1,270 in your account, unless the sponsor certifies your maintenance. What that means, in the certificate of sponsorship, they could tick a box to say that if you need that financial support, then we're willing to give it to you. And for certain roles, there's a criminal record certificate required, mainly to do with healthcare roles, or if you're working in the public, teaching jobs, healthcare jobs, but most of the jobs on the skilled worker list will not require a criminal record certificate. If they do, then you have to provide one for any country you lived in for at least 12 months in the last 10-year period. Conditions, you could either be granted a 3-year visa or 5-year visa. Most employers, if you're applying as a new entrant, will probably give you 2 years initially, or if you've done 2 years as a graduate, some will give you 3 years and apply for a further 2 to give you 5 years to get you to that 5-year settlement mark. Similar to most all visa categories, there's no access to public funds. You can do, work is permitted for, or supplementary employment is permitted for up to 20 hours, as long as the job is on the skilled worker list, and there are certain conditions in regards to that. And voluntary work is permitted, and also you can also study as well at the same time, as long as it doesn't interfere with your main full-time role. And as I mentioned, at the moment, there is a 5-year route to settlement. You may have heard of this white paper as the government have introduced back in May. There is talk of it being exceeded to 10 years. So we'll have to wait and see if that is the case. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions in regards to that. We've got a lot of skilled workers at this moment in time who contact us worried that am I going to still fall within the 5-year category, or are they going to increase mine to 10 years? Usually there are transitional provisions. Basically what that means is whatever rules you are in when you're granted a visa is what will most likely remain for those who are on skilled worker visas. But anyone that gets a skilled worker visa, let's say if they change the rules in January and you get your skilled worker visa after January, it could be that it may be a 10-year route to settlement. So we'll have to wait and see in regards to that. Again, in terms of documents required for a skilled worker visa, main identity documents such as your valid passport, a copy of your e-visa. If you need to meet the financial requirements, a recent bank statement showing that 28-day period. English language requirements, your degree certificates, for example. You may need a criminal record certificate, as I've explained. And if you've had a scholarship, you may need to provide a letter from the scholarship as well. And if you've got dependents, marriage certificates, birth certificates, etc. In terms of what conditions you can do as a student, this is now a bit off topic from the skilled worker visa requirements. A lot of you may already know that you can only work up to 20 hours during term time, and outside of term time, you could work full time. And you could do work placement as part of the course. So if you've got a sandwich course, you could work full-time in that 1 year that you may be doing a placement. You could also work up to 2 years as a student union sabbatical officer. And there's been transitional provisions recently where rules are going to change that. If you are going to apply for the Innovator Founder visa, which is like a business type visa, students who have completed their course can now establish a business whilst transitioning to that visa. And that's going to be from the 25th of November next month. As a student, you can't be self-employed or engage in any business activity, which is quite important. Again, you can't work as an entertainer or sports personnel, similar to a graduate visa, as Nancy has explained. And you can't fulfill a full-time permanent vacancy unless it's a recognised program as a doctor, dentist, or student union sabbatical officer. Just In regards to when you can take up a full-time job, this is very important. We do get asked this question a lot. So you could take up a full-time job once you have completed your course outside of term time, and you would have had to have, once you have submitted your skilled worker or graduate visa application, then you could take on a permanent vacancy. Prior to that, it'd probably be best if the employer gives you a fixed-term employment only. It's because it gives you like it coincides with your visa expiry date. But if you have got submitted an application and you're likely to get that skilled worker visa, there's a possibility of you working full-time. Due to time constraints, I won't go through all the Q&As right now at this moment in time, but we could always answer them later as part of the Q&As. But we do have this on our slides, so if they are shared with you, you could make use of the links which are on there, which will take you to either UKVI website or also onto our website as well. And just some other quick options in regards to other options if for any reason you don't fall within the graduate visa route or the skilled worker route. You could, like I said right at the beginning, if you've got a family member who's British or settled, you could switch into a partner visa category. There is that option now for students to do a switch over to an innovator founder, which is a business type visa, more tech related if they feel it's a scalable, viable business. And innovative as well at the same time, as it says on its name. Global talent visas, a great visa if you do qualify, mainly for if you're in creative arts or whether in digital technology, research, there's various, or science, humanities, whichever category you fall within, you could get a potential global talent visa. It's an endorsement type visa, so before you could actually apply for the visa, you need to apply for an endorsement by one of the endorsing bodies, and that's the same for an innovator founder as well. And most visa routes lead to settlement after 5 years. However, global talent visas or innovator founder can lead to settlement after 3 years. Again, there's some useful links from government UK websites in regards to graduate and skilled workers, and also our website has some useful links as well. And right at the end, if you do have any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Cool. Just to say for everyone in the room and on the call, the slides and thank you very much. What would I say? The slides and the recording are going to be made available for everybody. So don't worry too much about taking notes, all that sort of stuff. If we do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. What I might do while you're doing that is just invite Dave to come up and we can get sorted. Just bear with us, everybody, while we make the switch over.
Afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Dave Carter. I'm formerly a careers coach at London-based universities, a bit like Adam here. I did that for many, many years. I'm a former alumnus of a couple of graduate schemes. Some of you may have heard of the Big Four. I did some training in accounting at one of the Big Four companies. I then moved into advertising, did a graduate training scheme there. I'm now the founder of eCareersGrad, and we provide video-based e-learning courses in market intelligence, recruiter insight to lots and lots of universities up and down the country. I'm delighted to say that Manchester is one of our partners. So everything you see here today is completely free for you to access. And we don't just provide content specifically for international students, but as you'll see, if many of you are thinking as one potential option to remain in the UK, to build your career in the UK job market, you'll see that lots of the barriers that you potentially face, we provide content and relevant information to support you. So we're going to focus on something called Target the Right UK Employer Sponsor. So what we've heard in great detail is about the two major visas that you could potentially use to extend your stay in the UK, the graduate visa and the skilled worker visa. But that's only half the equation. We've heard a little bit about the rules and regulations, what you can be doing to get those visas. But what about the job market? What do employers feel about recruiting students on a graduate visa, on a skilled worker visa? Are there certain sectors in the UK economy that have a history of recruiting internationals in bigger numbers than others? Are there certain employers in the UK that are more international student friendly than others? That's what we're going to be focusing on in the next 20 minutes or so, maybe a little longer. The other thing I would say is one of the biggest barriers also for you will be dealing with interviews, UK interviews. And if you think that actually you would benefit from being able to see what good UK grad level interview performance looks like and what it doesn't, and understand the structures and techniques you can use to improve your own interview performance. We have free content available for you in that area as well. Some of you may well be going for quite commercial careers, banking, finance, consulting. It's a specific type of interview called a case study interview that some of you may face. Again, we've coached lots of students to success, videoed them, so you can see how you can improve your own case and interview performance. So back to today, and we're going to provide some, what I am still pretty sure is completely unique data for you, completely unique market intelligence for you. For example, the only place that you will be able to understand which recruiters have hired the most internationals on a skilled worker visa, remember that long 5-year skilled worker visa, in the last 3 years. We have that data annually, and from our profiles here, you can actually see which recruiters have historically been the ones that have hired the most internationals from an existing student or graduate visa. If you already have some ideas of sectors that you are interested in, you cannot apply to every company within a specific sector. Generally, on your long list should be those who have a history of recruiting the most international students. That should be one of your starting points, so that you begin to target organisations that are more likely to look at your suitability for the role rather than perhaps their current or historical sponsorship policy. And finally, our most popular search, the lawyers that just went before put up a listing right at the end of the UK government listing of sponsors. That is more than 50,000 employers long. It is publicly available. However, lots of those employers have never sponsored. And at the moment, the only way you can understand every single employer in the country and their recent sponsorship history is our UK search function. So before you apply for any interesting opportunity, check, pop the name into our search engine, and it will effectively provide the data for the last 3 years of sponsorship for that particular organisation. All right, if all that sounds of interest, before I get into just understanding a little bit more about the graduate visa and the skilled worker sponsorship from an employer's appetite, you might just want to take a quick screenshot of that QR code. As Manchester students, you can access everything I'm about to show you and lots more completely for free. Just find Manchester on the university partner listing, and then just follow the various guidelines. You will need to log on to the University of Manchester careers system, and hopefully you'll be able to see where I'm going now. All right, anyone planning on going to the careers fair today? Yeah? Anyone go yesterday? No? Okay, so I was there yesterday, 5 hours on a stand with 20 other employers, hundreds and hundreds of Manchester students there. The same thing is happening again today. I have gone ahead. We'll come back to her and we'll come back to him in a moment. In fact, we have gone way ahead. I told you most of that stuff. Anyway. Why are all these careers fairs happening right now? Many of you perhaps have just landed in the UK, you're still finding your feet, yet one of the careers fairs at Manchester was a couple of weeks ago. There are career fairs today and tomorrow, yesterday and today. And then what you're going to find is as the weeks pass by, there's going to be less employer visibility on campus, less organisations trying to attract your attention and encourage you to take an interest in the opportunities they have and apply. In fact, you will find that many of these opportunities to meet employers and actually apply for some of these employers is quite time limited. Generally, you'll find it between October and December, And as I'm sure you are aware, a bit like this session, it isn't timetabled, it's not curriculum-based. You will need to go out and find opportunities to engage with employers, and I would encourage you to look at the Manchester Careers Service events listing as a first point of call. So we have a couple of international students here. Vaishnavi is a digital marketing student. She was new to the UK, and she was quite confused when she started trying to get amongst information about the UK graduate job market. Grad schemes, grad jobs, sponsorship opportunities. What does all this mean? Which of it is relevant to me? Jason here had that same experience where he saw lots of stuff happening on campus in October and November, same as the job boards, really popular, lots of opportunities, and then kind of December, January onwards, just went quiet. All the jobs seemed to disappear. So what was happening? So I would encourage you to look at quite a nice free publication. It's called The Times Top 100 Employers. If we had a little bit of time more, I would take you through it. But this is a publication that's printed every year, and you can get it online for free. Thousands of students every year, as they finish their course, are surveyed and asked which graduate employers would you most like to begin your career with. Okay? And then you have a whole kind of section of the top 100 graduate employers, and there's some really useful information in that publication. The problem is there's very little information there for international students. You go through that whole publication, international students are not mentioned once. And one of the reasons that so many of the employers are on campus at the moment is because they feature in this Times Top 100 publication, and they are offering something called graduate training schemes, graduate development programs, those kind of structured programs that I'm sure some of you have become a little bit more familiar with. We think there are around about 1,000 of them in the UK. I did a couple myself. You often have the ability to do rotational elements to it. So you could spend 6 months in marketing, 6 months in operations, 6 months in finance, get a feel for the business, how the business ticks, and then maybe understand the areas you would like to specialise in. They are effectively seen as a fast track to leadership, which is why they are so popular, and they are volume hirers of students. Some of these organisations that I was next to yesterday will be hiring 1,500 graduates just in the UK next year. Many of these organisations, though, are in a bit of a war for talent. They all want to hire the best talent as quickly as possible. So what happens is it's a little bit of an arms race. It seems to get earlier every year. So many of the application deadlines for these employers are in the autumn term. Some of them, would you believe, have already passed for opportunities beginning in September or the kind of autumn of next year. These are very, very different to your so-called graduate job. Towards the end of your degree or your master's, you begin to think about the job market and you begin to look for jobs for an immediate start. Very, very different animals in the job market. So this is all relevant because I'm about to show you some sponsorship listings. And to make sense of those sponsorship listings and the potential range of opportunities available to you, I think there's some useful context here. One, the majority of roles in the UK at graduate level do not require a specific degree discipline. My goodness, it does help to have relevant work experience, but it is not a mandatory requirement to be able to apply for the vast majority of UK graduate jobs and schemes. However, I would suggest that the majority of interview questions that you are likely to be asked for some of these jobs are predictable. And the reason for that is, I'm just going to go past some of these, Lots of organisations in the UK are very focused on something called transferable skills. Skills that you pick up from your course, from work experience, student societies, and then can port into the workplace. So, what does this background mean for you? What it means is, in the UK, perhaps unlike your home country, you are not limited to just applying for jobs directly related to your degree. Potentially gives you lots and lots of freedom. Slight danger is, with so much choice, you can get a little bit paralysed with, well, should I be choosing that route, or that route, or that route? It's all so confusing, and there's some inertia to kind of moving forward. That's what the Careers Service are very good at, supporting you to work your way through that. But what this importantly means, especially for international students, is the need to be strategic. You may have specific job options of choice that you would like to ideally get in the UK, but it will need to be balanced a little bit with the reality of where the jobs are for international students, both in terms of the graduate visa and the sponsored visa. And you will see that in the cold light of day when I show you some of the data around where lots of international students are being hired. So the key mention here is Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. All of that is very, very important to begin to think about a strategy with the help of the Careers Service to navigate your UK job hunt. All right, would you mind if we just click to the course?
So, stop share. And then we want here. So, bear with me a second. And it was this one. There you go. Okay, I don't think it's showing up here though. No, it won't on here. So, hang on, how do we do this? Bear with 1 second. There you go. All good. Well done. Thank you.
All right, so this is the resource that I'm hoping is going to become part and parcel of your graduate job search in the UK. I'm going to look at a little bit of data. I'm not going to overwhelm you, but I think it's quite interesting to know. So we're going to put health and the care sector and education to one side. But I will tell you now, over the last 3 years, almost 20,000 employers have sponsored an international student or recent grad or someone on an existing UK visa into the skilled worker visa route. That's that 5-year-long long-term working visa. Historically, UK employers have been very international student friendly. However, are there certain employers that tend to be routinely recruiting internationals and in volume, not just in ones and twos? If you take that 17,500, only 250 UK employers, remember excluding health and education, have actually sponsored more than 10 during that period. Okay, so it's quite concertinaed into a relatively small number of employers who recruit internationals in big numbers. If you were to go even further, just 40 employers have sponsored more than 50. So in my time as a careers coach, and I have seen this year after year after year, this is the issue. So many internationals are generally failing, not because they are not suitable candidates, but they are effectively applying completely blind to lots of employers that they like the sound of, lots of opportunities, but where these employers just do not offer international students opportunities, especially for sponsorship. Let me show you what I mean. Some of you, I'm sure, recognize these employer logos. Okay, these are the great and the good. All of these you will find on that top 100 times top 100 listing of the most aspirational employers to work for. The numbers in blue represent the number of sponsorships issued to those on a student or graduate or an existing generally sponsored skilled worker visa. So you can see the PwCs of this world, the Amazons of this world, JP Morgan, big investment bank, huge historical sponsors of internationals. Look at the opposite end of the scale, Pfizer. Anyone know who Pfizer is? Yeah, what do they do? Pharmaceutical company, global reach, thousands in a global workforce, have sponsored less than 5 internationals in the last 3 years. L'Oreal, anyone heard of L'Oreal? Okay, I cannot tell you how many international students have been in my office in previous years with a CV, excitedly looking to apply for the L'Oreal sales, marketing, branding programs. Not a single international sponsored by such a huge global organisation. Are there certain sectors that are more international student friendly than others? Professional services. So when I was at the fair yesterday, I was surrounded by lots and lots of accounting organisations, consulting organisations, organisations that offer professional services to businesses and other companies. Historically, even for some of the less well-known organisations, they have recruited in large numbers. There are other sectors too that historically have been very international student friendly. Some of these employers, I'm sure you recognise, they will all individually have different graduate recruitment needs, but you can see lots and lots of sponsorship happening by your peers in previous years. However, unfortunately, this is not true for all sectors that internationals are interested in. If we go to the opposite extreme, so fast-moving consumer goods, media publishing and the arts, NGOs and not-for-profit, even some organisations with graduate training programmes have done almost no international hiring over the last 3 years. So what we're building up to are some very, very important listings that I'm hoping are likely to inform a long-term application strategy for internationals. This is our Times Top 100. What it effectively does is it ranks historically over the last 3 years the most 100 international student-friendly recruiters in the UK. You can see the trends of sponsorship from our organisations. You can see the recruitment areas that they typically recruit into. And if you wanted to learn a little bit more about these organisations and even apply, you can do so directly from these profiles. We have the same type of thing, but by sector, whether it be professional services or banking or consulting or law or engineering. All these organisations have historically very, very different appetites for recruiting internationals. You cannot apply to every organisation in a particular sector of interest. Generally, it's wise to use market intelligence to use these employers as a long list. Inform yourself of the organisations who have a history of being international student friendly. And as I mentioned, whilst you can publicly get that list of UK sponsors, in many ways it's quite redundant because thousands and thousands of them have never sponsored in the UK. So again, you can search for any company that you might be interested in before you apply and just check the recent sponsorship history of any UK company you are interested in. I'm really sorry, can we just go back to the presentation?
Sure, I'll give it a go.
This might take a minute. Oh, that's wrong. Sorry everyone, this is going to take some time. Battery's going to work, there we go. Which slide can you remember?
Just where you are, that would be fine.
That one?
Yeah, lovely.
Okay, bear with. Slideshow, play from current slide, and then PowerPoint. Share. Oh, hang on. No, that's not worked. There you go.
Amazing. Thank you so
Should
much.
do it. I'll just hide that. And then the tree. There you go.
Okay, so we heard a little bit before about these two main visas in the UK, and generally most of you in this room will need to know a little bit about both of these. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, as the guys from Latitude have talked about. So that's what we're dealing with, these two major visas. And historically, and this is again a survey done every year, this is 70 of the biggest organisations in the UK recruiting. A full 71% have effectively said, generally the reason we recruit internationals is because they are the best person as part of the selection process. So historically, UK employers have been very international student friendly. However, let's just deal with a couple of key things in the market. Do UK employers recruit internationals into permanent jobs on a graduate visa? A couple of years ago, I would have generally said yes, but generally by huge exception. Have I heard about organisations taking students on a permanent job role on effectively a temporary visa like the graduate visa? Yes, often on a try before you buy basis. It's almost like a long-term job interview. However, you will absolutely find that with many of these graduate training programs that are applications open now, you will find that often some of those employers will say, look, our training program is a minimum of 3 years. The graduate visa is 2 years, soon to become 18 months. It is just not commercially viable for us to employ students on that program. We are international student friendly though. If we're going to take internationals, we would much rather sponsor. And as we have seen, there are certain employers that are much, much more international student friendly than others. There are certain sectors that are much more international student friendly than others. We heard about the new entrant minimum salary, which is great news for you. For most entry-level graduate roles, the minimum salary is not 41,700, it's 33,400, but that is subject to the individual role. And as the Latitude guys mentioned as well, this has steadily been rising over the last couple of years. So whilst UK employers are still very international student friendly, what has been happening is the UK government is making it more difficult for employers to hire internationals on a sponsored visa. So we're getting a really interesting thing in the marketplace, which I have never seen before, in that some employers will sponsor some roles in their recruitment portfolio, but not others. Some employers will sponsor in some locations around the UK, but not others. And some who previously sponsored and would never go near the graduate visa are now actually employing graduates on a graduate visa. So here, for example, someone like Deloitte, who was there at the fair yesterday, a number of different business lines. For some of those business lines, they will actually sponsor you, but it would need to be in specific locations. In some cases, they won't sponsor you if you are applying for different locations. Does anyone have an idea of why? Very good. Okay, so generally the minimum salary is UK-wide. for those job roles by the visa requirements. Yet organisations often have salary bandings, and because of the cost of living in London and the South, they can often pay that little bit more. And when we understand that the average graduate starting salary is 33,000 in the UK, but the minimum salary for sponsorship is 33,400, we're finding some of these job roles are just not quite at the level required to be able to offer sponsorship, which is why you are getting these kind of slight changes in the marketplace. Yet in Southampton and Bristol, they will actually take students on the graduate visa. And generally what they're going to do is they're going to sponsor them after their graduate visa expires, because they can't pay the minimum salary in Southampton and Bristol. But they will be able to later down the line. So what I'm suggesting to you is the sponsorship and the market for internationals is very, very dynamic and turbulent before. We have never seen it like this. So the historical data that eCareersGrad provides is very, very useful from a long list. All right, that in many ways I would suggest will help you target organisations to go on a long list. But unfortunately, there is no substitution for doing your own research to the organisations that you want to apply for. Some of these organisations are incredibly transparent about their outlook for internationals. Some of them you have to work a little bit harder to find the information. But I would suggest to you, better to spend 10 minutes researching an organisation than 3 or 4 hours, or even longer, going through applications and psychometric tests, only to find that the organisation is highly, highly unlikely to be able to employ you because they either don't sponsor or they just have no international student focus. Okay, so market intelligence, I would suggest to you, is absolutely key. Okay, any questions on any of that? Yeah.
But how is new entrant different from skilled worker? And are there overlaps?
So the skilled worker visa and the graduate visa are the two main routes, the two visas, okay? And the skilled worker visa, as we heard earlier, you cannot just go and apply for it. You need to find an employer willing to sponsor you on a job paying the minimum salary required for that role. I think the key salient point here is if you just Google minimum salary in the UK, you're going to come up with a slightly eye-watering £41,700 as a minimum. Okay? For most of you, if not all of you, that does not apply to you. You are considered new entrants into the UK job market, and there is a huge discount, as we have seen, down to more like 33,000. Okay? Now, one of the tools that we have in our database here, again uniquely, is if you tried to find a new entrant minimum salary for yourself for marketing or engineering, good luck. We have a little database that we put together. You can type in your job search, type in your job role, and it will bring up the new entrant minimum salary required for that job role. So at least you are armed with market intelligence to say, if I want to work in marketing, I know the minimum salary that an organisation needs to be paying me to apply for that role.
If I'm here interview and I'm negotiating with the company,
Okay.
I can tell them that I don't need a salary of 41,000 to get a skilled worker visa. I can go to the new entrance route and I can still have, you can like pay me less and then try out and then sponsor a skilled worker. Is that right?
So generally you'll find big employers have big teams of legal staff and HR staff who are all over this, and they know what they are doing. They are the machine in this process. But smaller organisations, you're absolutely right, many of them may not even have an HR staff member or someone from a legal team, or even require the services of a Latitude Law, so they won't be informed. And in some cases, I've absolutely heard of students actually informing the employer of the relevant right to work, the new entrant salary that you can be paid, and actually that has put into process the wheels of sponsorship.
generally either way we can do it.
So one, they need to have a sponsorship license. Two, ideally, they have a history of sponsoring, right? Because otherwise you're going to be the one breaking the glass ceiling. It's much easier if they've been through this process before. And three, it kind of depends on the organisation you're applying to, as generally how much knowledge they have about this whole area. Sometimes it can pay for you to be armed with the information and inform them. Okay? But the bigger companies generally have the personnel and history of doing this. Any other questions? Okay, so this is quite interesting, just as a final. So BSc Physics student Jason.
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
My fault. Go back.
There we go. So do you remember I was talking about plan A, plan B, plan C? Your job, your preferred job options versus the reality of where the jobs are. So Jason, he went to careers fairs in his final year, got very, very interested in things like consulting. All right, thought it would be a great professional grounding in business. And in the UK, you can move straight into an area like management consulting directly from a physics degree, okay? As we saw earlier. He did really well because it's very competitive, got interviews, got assessment centres, no further. His plan B, it was not his first choice, but you can see from the data that we have that professional services, places like audit and assurance and tax, it will give you fantastic professional experience, but it wasn't Jason's first choice. But historically, that's where the opportunities for sponsorship were in volume, which means when he applied here, actually he was latterly successful, and that's generally this kind of dichotomy between preference, plan A, plan B, and where the job market is offering opportunities for internationals. Vaishnavi here, digital marketing student, very keen to remain on that track. Okay, managed to get a placement experience, utilised the graduate visa, is still in the UK on the graduate visa. The issue that she has now is that that graduate visa, that 2-year graduate visa, is ticking down, and she needs to find a sponsor to be able to pay her enough for the minimum salary for that role to remain in the UK and forge ahead in digital marketing. And that's the bit she's struggling with now. With a bit of luck, with all this additional experience and with the market intelligence that she has, it will happen for her. But as you can see, the 2 different visa routes potentially require different kind of strategies. Plan A, plan B, plan C. Any questions? All right. So if you didn't manage to get access to eCareersGrad for free as a Manchester student, again, just use the QR code on the right, find Manchester on the list of partner universities, and follow the instructions for access. Cool. Thank you very much.
I will just check that there are no questions in the chat. Oh, no, resume. Bear with me a second. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, everybody, we'll call that there. Oh.
Question, regarding placements in discipleship, how does that work? Would I have to apply to a graduate visa, and would I need to apply to that?
Not for placements, no. A placement, you're talking about a placement that is between 2nd and 3rd year. That's covered within your student visa. So that's all fine.
Could I just answer that? Are you thinking longer term then?
No. As in, like, just my placement scholarship.
Yeah.
It's not, my visa is only to...
So your placement year is usually classed as part of your student visa.
Yeah.
So in your class, for example, it give you that 1 year allowance for you to do your placement year. So if it's a 4-year course, your placement year will probably sandwich in after 3rd year or maybe last year. So that's all incorporated in your student visa, not as part of your graduate visa. That's
Okay. So that would include even if it says like 27, page 27.
on the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, in short, if your class end date is 27, your placement year will be incorporated before that 27 end date. It's all, student placements are all part of the student visa, it's not a different visa. It doesn't count as graduate visas.
If you just look at it from the marketplace though, lots of students do placements because they get real world experience, it's fantastic. Employers offer placements, often to talent spot. Okay, you will often find lots and lots of employers will go on and recruit people who they have enjoyed having and feel that they would be beneficial to the company, all right? So, well, a lot of what you've seen today, especially about the sponsorships and who is sponsoring, etc., is still relevant for those who are looking for internships and placements. Ideally, what you want to find is an employer of choice, but also one that historically has been internationally student-friendly, right? Because generally that works for them, and it will work for you. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Guys, sorry, can you move here just for the microphone?
Yeah.
Any other questions? We have had one question that's on the screen now. So can we apply to a graduate visa as soon as we receive results in November, or should we wait for the graduation ceremony in December before applying?
You can apply as soon as you get the results, as soon as you've successfully completed your course, you can apply for graduate visa.
Okay, also, do we have to remain in the UK till we get a decision on the graduate visa?
Yes, it would be advisable too, because as Nancy explained, if you are outside of the UK and the results have come through and the Home Office are notified that the course has now completed, they can continue your visa if there's a longer period. So for that reason, it's best to stay in the UK and make your application just to be on the safe side.
So if we need to wait till our results come out, if the results come out in November, our student visa expires in Jan. So how much time does it typically take for the graduate visa decision to come in?
Graduate visa decisions are pretty quick. I'd say usually within a 15-day turnaround time. So in terms of going to your question, that's how much usually how long it takes for graduate visa turnaround.
Can we apply before our results?
Before your results? Again, then in terms of meeting the eligibility requirements, the university won't have, the Home Office won't have that bulk confirmation from the university of you having passed your course. So for that reason, there's a possibility that it could be refused. Now, if for any reason, there's a time scale where the visa is about to expire and the results still haven't come through, you could possibly, I recommend getting legal advice at the time, but there could be a possibility of submitting the application so it's in before your visa expires with an explanation to say, due to X, Y reasons, we haven't got our results yet. However, it will be published within the week. Can you potentially hold our application for at least a week until the results are sent over to you, and the Home Office may accept that. Unless if you haven't got a valid reason, then I would advise not to make that application because there's a possibility it could be refused.
We have had one other question. What would actually be since intake changes on a yearly basis, this is probably more to your point, Dave, about how many people get sponsored every year, what are the chances going to be this year?
So, undoubtedly, if you look at the sponsorship pattern, generally you are finding there are less sponsorships available this year than there were last, or certainly that's kind of what we're finding. Some sectors are really struggling to pay the minimum salary required for that particular sector, so perhaps they have previously sponsored and they're finding it much more difficult to do so. Other sectors, they are still sponsoring in kind of quite a consistent way to previous years. So I think to answer your question, there are still lots of opportunities for sponsorship. My feeling is it's going to get harder. And I would say that market intelligence is becoming more and more important so that you understand a little bit more about targeting the right employer who has a history and you know that they are offering sponsorship in the locations and the job roles that you are interested in, rather than just applying blindly.
And just to give a quick example, in the legal sector, for example, if you're a paralegal, which is still a fee earner, but you're not solicitor as yet, Most paralegals could be paid a salary of around earning £21,000, £22,000, up to 25, let's just say, for example. But now, if you're a new entrant, a law firm has to pay a paralegal £33,400. There's some trainee solicitors that are not paid that amount of money. So, you know, in terms of recruiting for paralegal levels, the salary increase, you know, has made it difficult for new entrants. You know, law grads, for example, that will just start as paralegals before they get onto a training contract. So it can be quite, potentially is going to be challenging. But again, as David explained, there are certain sectors that are willing to pay that salary requirements, larger corporations, especially down south in London, you know, it's still achievable.
Just to reiterate from my own perspective, a lot of what the Careers Service sort of talk about in general is a far more targeted approach that goes even more for international students. Dave already touched on it, but the more targeted, the more intelligence you have, the better and the easier your job search, and the less frustrating it is going to be.